G'day, welcome back. Today is the next video on my series on learning from master mistakes, or as it was originally, learning from other people's mistakes. And what I'm going to look at today in quite a bit of detail is bishop endings, and particular bishop and two pawns versus a bishop ending in different sort of situations, opposite color bishops, same color bishops, and so on. The reason I'm doing this is that there's a lot of very structured material on rook endgames, for instance, with Philidor's position, Lucena position, frontal defense, and so on, all that sort of stuff. But when I've been in bishop endgame positions, I can remember a couple. I just have no real idea of overall principles and what sort of strategic and tactical ideas are relevant, and I sort of bumble my way through them. So what I want to do today, the core of today, is actually looking at a set of games by higher level, higher rated players and seeing the sort of mistakes they have committed and try and use that as a lesson to remember the things which I should and should not be doing. Okay, so that's sort of the outline. I'm going to do a couple of things in this lesson today. I want to look behind the statistics of some of these bishop and two pawns versus bishop endgames. So I've done a bit of a statistical analysis of that as well. As well as starting off, we're going to look at a puzzle, which I wouldn't normally do, but you'll understand why in a second. So let's go to the capture screen, and I'll just bring up the front page of the chapter from Muller and Lamprecht, Bishop versus Pawn, chapter 4, and you can see the sort of different categories he goes over. This chapter I've read a long time ago, forgotten most of it, and you can see his analysis is quite structured. What I thought we'd start off with, though, is just for a bit of entertainment, is that that position there is a study by a guy called Henry Otten, who I'm not familiar with. You can see actually here is all I could find out about him. This is the Arva's website, and we've got a Henry Otten down here from presumably Germany, born in Germany and moved to the USA, born in 1855 and died in 1930. He has 16 puzzles in the database. And as usual, what I've done is I've run my sort of composer list, just sort of put him in the placement of it. And you can see here he is here. So he's a bit after Kling and Horwitz and Datina, and he's about the same time as Locock and Retty, and then I think Dedler. He's born around about the same time, so he's sort of not really early, but sort of slightly later period. This was mainly supposed to be for corresponding square development, but as time goes on, I think I'll just throw in other composers who pop up, although I know very little about Henry Otten. So close that and with that. And this is the Henry Otten position. Now this is it's fascinating. And I thought this is a good warm up for looking at the mistakes by masters, because what you want to do is work out how white wins this. Even though he doesn't have a bishop, black has a bishop, and it's really quite tactical, and it's all about covering the squares and all that sort of stuff, right? So have a look at it. I think this is not a particularly difficult study, but you got to think through how white wins this game. Okay, so as we go forwards, there's only one winning move: push your pawn, and as I've highlighted there. So now, if you have a look at it, two squares to get to the A7 square, which according to Muller was the last stop, right? The bishop just has to stop that. The king's miles away, so the bishop just has to get there in time. And I've highlighted the G1 to A7 diagonal. So 1, 2, the bishop has two moves to get onto that diagonal. Now, if you go that way, it doesn't work because you get in two moves, but that square is already covered by the white king. So that doesn't work. So there's obviously only one move which has any real chance of working, and that is to go that way. So let's do that. Put that move on the board. Bishop to F8. Okay, so what's next? So now, if white pushes the pawn, then the bishop will cover on that square. So we've got to cover that square. Next move. Right, so now the bishop's in trouble again. How do we get there? In two moves. Okay, so can't use this diagonal because the king is in the way. So we've got to go back to the C1 to H6 diagonal this time. Okay. Now, if white could get a repetition here if it just moves king backwards and forwards, but that's obviously not what white wants. So what's the winning idea here? Check. Have to take with the bishop. Otherwise, we lose access to the diagonal. And then now it's very tricky. Move the king. Cover this square. Bishop's only one way to do it. It's king. And now we're covering both squares, even if the bishop moved back. And that's game over. That's really fascinating, the way that the bishop is able to be contained simply by a king, but obviously this is happening because in the way of puzzles, this black king is really on the wrong square. Okay, so that was just a bit of a light warm-up for what we're going to be looking at. So that is Henry Otten. So let's go on. What do I want to do first? Let me bring over my Python script for a second. So what I did is I'll just create a new script. I'm not going to run the full thing, but I'll show you basically what it does. We load up the CASA PGN, just stop it there. 5.5 million games in the CASA database, and then this is the material I was searching for, either king, bishop, 2 pawns versus king, bishop, and king, bishop, 2 pawns, right? Either way, and it goes away and finds those games. And then having found the games which satisfy that material balance, I then use the table bases, 6-piece table base in this case, to work out what the result should have been in each of those positions. Because you understand, what are the main sort of factors driving whether these are the winning positions for the stronger side or not. And then you can have a look at this sort of, then I put the output in the results based on what type of pawns you had. 2 A pawns, double A pawns, A and a B pawn, A and a C pawn. And then you can see the results here. The A and the B pawns, not very winning actually. Only one game in 3 is a win, whereas you have A and C separated pawns. It's 11 and 15. And actually, I flipped it, so that could also be F and H. A and D, A and E, A and F. You can see separated pawns actually are pretty damn good. And separated pawns, which are not rook's pawns, actually even the best, right, a B and a G. So that was the results. And then I broke it down by how far advanced the most advanced pawn was. And then I broke it down to this one where X is opposite color bishops and equal is same color bishops. And that also, we're going to look at some charts in a sec. By and large, it's better to have same colored bishops because then you can, this is one of the things, if it's opposite colored bishops, the king and the other bishop can often block you and form a fortress, for instance, right? Same colored bishop, you've got more chance to advance your pawns and also drive the other bishop from the covering squares. So what I did, let's just load up an Excel. Just give me 1 second. Okay, here it is. It's quite a big page here. And I've just been a bit lazy here. This is like a proof of concept. I think this type of analysis I'm going to do a lot more with, a lot more pawn in games, a lot more systematically, but just sort of fun to look at it this way. So here is the wins according to the table base and the number of games. A and A, just the top pawn types, and this is percent wins. And you can see overall it's quite interesting. I think if you look at the pattern, it's kind of like you can see some of these ones over here, which obviously corresponding to having a sort of a large gap between the pawn tiles is where the winning percentages are. So I've redone that. I've reformatted that. Pawn gaps. So actually, strangely, you got a pretty good winning percentage with the double pawns. But anyway, you see, by and large, it's an increasing pattern. I could have done a chart, but anyway, get the sense. By and large, the larger the gap between the pawns, the higher winning chance. And I wasn't satisfied with that, so I said I'll do the same thing. But now this is opposite color bishops and his same color bishops. What you'll notice is that, first of all, this is the same colored bishops. The winning percentages are more monotonically increasing here. It gets up to like 88%, 82%, 80%. So definitely the big gap between the pawns are better because it's harder for the defender to defend along one diagonal. And it's also true for the opposite colored bishops as well, but the winning percentage for opposite color bishops is much lower. I think that's the key from this. I think it's a fairly standard sort of conclusion, but basically even like 20% lower, right? And you can see that, for instance, what I saw here was really weird. Is there was one combination here which was really bad. Yeah, it was like this one here, a C and an E pawn, which is like a sort of quite central pawns. 0 wins out of 7 opposite colored bishops, and obviously that's sort of drags the percentages down a lot. Anyway, so that's the thing to think about. You could actually have 70 up to 90% win chance if you've got same colored bishops, and it's more likely to be 50 to 70% if you're lucky if you've got opposite colored bishops. I thought it was an interesting observation. As I say, that's just early days in terms of trying to do some analysis like that. So that's sort of the framework. And now what I want to do is basically go through a number of bishop endgames between strong players where the strong players made a mistake and try and understand why they were mistakes, and they can help improve our games as well. Just 1 minute. Okay, so what we've got here is 8 games, and they're pretty interesting games. You can see some famous players. Actually, we've seen the Capablanca Janowski game before, and then we've got a few other ones, Topalov, Karpov, and so on. And just to reiterate, what we have here is all the king, bishop, and 2 pawns versus king, bishop, endgames in my database, and then I've used the table bases to show ones which have errors in them. Now, there's two main categories. It's where somebody had a winning position and it became a draw, and the other one is somebody's in a drawing position went to a loss. So we've got a mixture of those. And as we go through, we'll see that it's not just often just tends to be not one error. It tends to be errors by both players as we go through. And I've just made a note of some things to think about here. All these factors beforehand, but king position in front or behind, bishop in front or behind, number of squares on the diagonal which you're covering. I mean, obviously types of bishops and so on. Is the king in the square if the pawns all got exchanged off, wrong-colored corner, relative king position. So I want to see a few of these factors come along, and there's often it's quite important tempos. You lose a tempo, you might lose, so you've got to bear that in mind, right? So first of all, we'll go through these. They're all great positions. So let's see what they look like. The first one to look at is this Capablanca-Janowski one, which we've seen before. It's a super famous game because Janowski resigned in a drawn position. So let's just go back to this position here, where it gets to the two pawns in the bishop endgame. This is bishops in the same color, and this should be a winning position. And that little study I did beforehand, you can see part of the reason for that is the distance which is separating the pawns. Now, black's obviously going to pick up the G pawn, and then the problem is that his king's so poorly placed that white should be able to get his pawn moving forwards. Okay, first of all, black has to move his bishop off the diagonal. And the next move by Capablanca was actually a blunder, amazingly. Bishop c3 check is a blunder. We'll look into that. Let's go through that line, and then later on we'll go back to this position and work out why moving bishops to other squares was actually winning. Right, so bishop c3 check, grab the pawn, not much else to do, and advance the pawn. It's okay. So this is all a drawn position now, and then Janowski does the right thing. He circles around the back. We've seen this before in Fischer-Taimanov, I believe. Check, king circles around. Advance the pawn. King keeps on circling around. Perfect play by Janowski. Circles around. Now, the whole point here is, I've done this position before, but I think it's really amazingly interesting. King is behind the pawn, but pressures the pawn from behind, and that prevents white from being able to block the diagonal and advance the pawn. If he blocks the diagonal there, then bishops get exchanged and we pick up the pawn. And if white does a lot of maneuvering and blocks the diagonal there instead, well, then the bishop will on another diagonal. And then the king's covering that square. So we'll be able to stop white from covering on that square as well. So all these factors playing into it. So a bit of maneuvering with the bishop. Stay on that diagonal. Exactly what we said. Perfect. And then Janowski played bishop e3 and resigned. It's a drawn position. So I feel sorry for him. Great player from the early 20th century. So that was weird. Okay, so now as we said, we go back to this position here, and we said that here bishop c3 check was a mistake and threw away the win. So let's have a look at one of the other lines, bishop d2, and see what was the difference. What's the difference between c3 check and bishop d2? Do the same thing. Take the pawn, advance the pawn, bring the king over, blockade. Okay, so black loses tempo, can't advance around to the back of the pawn, and that's decisive. And then just for completeness, because I think this is a really interesting position, I'm totally amazed by it. The other line we looked at in terms of winning was bishop d6. Let's go bishop d6. See what happens this time. The pawn. You'd actually say it's the same problem, covering that f4 square, which is pretty important. Don't realize it at the time. So there we go. That's the first one which we've looked at. So the importance of tempo, and one of those key defensive techniques, running your king around the back of the pawn, holding this square in particular, so that you can block it. In this case, the length of the diagonals is long enough. There's 4 squares, and that's more than 4 squares. If we go back to the earlier video, I looked at this position in the Century New one. Next one to look at. Save that. So this game is Rosenthaler's Sakis from 1984. And let's get to the position which has got the two. See where this position came from. Okay, so here's where it becomes a 2 versus 2. Now this is winning, and once again, because great separation between the pawns, and that always helps. White pawns are nicely advanced. Winning position. right? So let's just continue. King e6, bishop d4, just some gentle maneuvering, advanced one pawn, both pawns on the fifth rank now. Attacking the c pawn, can't afford to lose it. So nice position we have here. So white's going to have to decide to go one way or the other, hold the pawns with the bishop. Okay, right, here we are. Here's the winning strategy. Okay, now we've been able to push that pawn, so the bishop's going to have to go back and block. So one piece is held. Now we're going to do, this is the key. Check, and just amazing. One of these moves wins, and one of them is a draw. Think about it. King d4, it's only a draw. Now we'll see why. We actually get a concept of corresponding squares. Okay, the bishop keeps the g pawn blocked. Keep it blocked. Oh, and I've highlighted that. Basically, the black king has to cover that square, and obviously the king can't go around that way, so the white can't get in. And if we go back, this is the game continuation. If we go back, same thing. You stop the white king from having access to that square and force his way through, and you've got the bishop covering the g pawn and the king covering the c pawn, but also making sure the king doesn't advance on either side. Right, and that was a draw. So let's have a look. What happened if we played king b4? So we've got the b4 square. Now this is a key square. So let's see how this would continue. King can get around. Can't do much about it. Zugzwang. Black would like to hold that position, but can't. King gets around. Check. Hold the pawn. Got to hold the pawn. Don't lose the pawn. King comes around the back. Everything's held. King has got to b7. Got to stop that. Advance the pawn. But this is the problem at Zugzwang. Got to hold that with the bishop. Got to hold that with the bishop. Can't do both. King goes back. We push our pawn. And now it's curtains because we've got the pawn one more square forwards. Move around the other side. And the pawns are just advancing. Yep. Okay. So that was kind of interesting. Go back to this absolutely key position. Check has been delivered. You have to know at this stage. Add that to one of the strategies to think about outflanking. Let's move on. Next game. Save that. Okay, now we've got Topalov versus Nakamura. Go back to where it first becomes. Okay, here's a few exchanges. So now, obviously can't exchange. So here we've got this position. This should be a win for white. Same colored bishops, connected pawns. Okay, let's see how the game goes. Improving the king position, advancing the pawns. Going to gradually make our way forwards. Push the king back. White's going roundabout method here. Don't know if that was entirely necessary. Okay, so this is a tactical oversight. Let's have a look at what happened with g4. g4 is just a draw. Have a look at the position. Interesting tactic here. Just play bishop h5. Yep. Gold pawns, wrong colored bishop. So that would be a draw. That wasn't played. King f4. So white is winning again. It's a bit complicated. But I think this position here, just watch out for, I just thought this is quite interesting. Watch out for that type of tactic. Play that, and you've forced the draw. Simplifying, spelled it correctly. Okay, let's move on to the next game, which is Mariotti versus Larsen, 1978. Go to the position where it became 2 pawns versus 2 pawns. Obviously can't take the bishop because the resulting pawn endgame would be winning. This position is drawn at the moment. Going to move bishop out of the way. That's fine. Check. We're losing that pawn. Okay, so now we've actually devolved back to a Centurini style position, and the diagonals, black should be able to block on these two diagonals. But let's see how it goes. Yep, push the pawn, and okay, so there's one move wins and one move draws. That's the wrong move because you can't go around the back this time because you're too far. You've got to go around and block from the front. And let's see what happens this game. H5, G8, working our way in. Now king f5 was a mistake because now the king has access. King's in the ideal position now, and the diagonals are long enough, so that's a draw. Okay, so what we want to do is go back to this position here, where it's winning for white. What's the correct move? Correct move is bishop to g8. Don't let the black king get closer. Drive the bishop off the diagonal. And that's winning. So there's you can look at different versions of that, but basically you just the black king is too far away. It's not holding the pawn, so white can maneuver his bishop in that way. Go way back to the front here. I said once that loses, this draws. So let's see what the drawing line is here. So the pawn advances, block it with the bishop. King got to come around. Our king comes around, and we're pressuring the pawn now, and that's done. That's enough. Pressuring the pawn. As soon as the bishop moves off the diagonal, we move back onto the diagonal, and it'll be a draw. Okay, so that goes back to those Centurini ones. So the other thing to think about is when it's a two-pawn endgame, you think about, can I transition to a one-pawn endgame with some of the drawing, or if you're the stronger side, is it going to be still a win for me after the transition? Save that one. Okay, next game, Walter Brown versus Gurevich. Now, I included this is very strange, this game. We'll just do it from this position, right? That white played f6 check. And the obvious move here is king g6. You pick up the g-pawn and a draw. Okay? But what happened is played king to f7. Now, that is really weird because Walter Brown returned the favor. Two moves here. Let's have a look at the game continuation. Bishop to b1. And now the pawn's going to drop, and that's a draw. Okay? But what about king to e4? Let's see what happens in this position. Gosh, you got to go back and get that pawn, but now that you're not going to get the pawn. And now it's two pawns. Like that. Very advanced. Two very advanced pawns. Not going to have much chance holding this position. That's a win, right? So that's just another lesson in the fact that in this position here, you should obviously, your bishop's holding the pawn. So you grab that pawn and it'll be an easy draw. So it was a draw, but not in the way you expected. Okay, let's have a look what else we see here. Next game, Karpov Polgar. Let's go back to where it became. Okay, here's where it became two pawns advantage. Position should be drawn here. So let's see how white tries to advance. I mean, the thing is, black's king is in a very good position, and this white pawn is very far back. So I guess you'd think that although the pawns are separated by two clear files, it's going to be difficult for white to make progress. This is all very good. Blocking the pawn with the other bishop. Okay, white's got to move his king around to the queen side. The only way to make any progress. Still drawn. Okay, so now here's the problem, right? The king is in a perfect position. It's one of those situations where if you imagine my old friend corresponding squares, it's kind of like that. That's corresponding squares, and you're blocking the white king from the e6 square. So look, game continuation. King g7 is bad, and the problem is that for whatever reason, Karpov played king e5, and it petered out to a draw. But let's have a look if he played king e6. Logical thing to do. Maybe he was fearful of his check, but no, that's not a problem. We move across to the queen side, and now the pawn goes through. So it's a clear win. So that was quite surprising to see Karpov miss a line like that. So that was a bit weird when in this position king g7 was played, whereas in fact the white king is in perfect position, and the line that should have been played, bishop a4. So now the white king can't advance through that route, so the white king's got to go the long way around. We've seen this position before, where the bishop holds the g-pawn, and white simply can't move the black king from the d7 square. Now we've got Krakvin, Elvest, 2019, more recent game. Okay, 2 versus 1. Okay, this is the position. This is a drawn position. The pawns are quite widely separated, but the obvious thing you can see here is this is the wrong coloured bishop. So by and large, a lot of these positions can be held because you sacrifice the bishop for the f-pawn and hide in the corner. Let's go with hiding in the corner. Take the pawn. Now, is this drawn or not? It's drawn. So this is the thing where king c6 was a losing move. What's the correct move? If you go back, nothing wins, but that move is not viable. Just play bishop to e3 and take the pawn. Game over. But that move, the losing move, because the king's not in the right position, drive off the diagonal, and then now it's too late. Diagonal's too short. It's a win. Okay, so got to remember that the king being on c6 doesn't really help. You got to get rid of this pawn. And if white couldn't play king c6, then you'd have more tempos to solve the problem. Okay, next game. Korsibov versus Tal from 1991. That's really late in his life. And let's have a look at what position's like. This position is drawn. The black king's in a really bad position, and the white king is blockading the pawns. Perfect. So let's see what went wrong here. All good. Oh, okay, right. So what white should have done is bishop e7, pick up one of the pawns straight away, and both pawns drop. So let's have a look at that. Bishop e7, pawns all dropping. Okay, right. So, but the problem is that white played king to f5 again, and that was sloppy because now game continuation. Bishop here. We're holding the pawns now, and if white goes after this pawn, then that pawn will get away. So let's have a look what goes on. King back, blocking out the black king. Bishop g7, threatening to charge the pawn down. Go back, king up, king takes f6, and the pawn advances. There's no hope. Okay, so that was just get back to this position. Got to take advantage of some of the simplifying tactics which occur from time to time. And that was the last game. Okay, so went over those games fairly quickly, but I was just trying to show some of these key themes which you can use in your own games when you're either attacking with the extra two pawns or maybe some of the defensive resources that you have in those situations. So I hope you enjoyed that, and thank you very much for watching.